update on our Diablo 4 Season 8 Barbarian build. And this one is going to be a lot of fun. We've changed quite a few things, so hang in there. Let's see if we can get it all delivered to you guys in a way that makes sense and is not an hour and a half long. So basically, before we were doing a HotA build where we were detonating earthquakes, doing lots of damage with those detonations. I was using Whirlwind to sort of pass through enemies smoothly, to get a bleed on them, and to use the boss, I think Walking Death Beam, Wandering Death Beam, to give them that 50% increased damage from you for 1 second. So now I kind of got annoyed having to press Whirlwind all the time right before my doing my damage, and I felt like, let's just simplify this a little bit. We really need to make sure that we're getting bash stacks and then hitting HotA with that. And so I figured that I would try a build where I wasn't using Whirlwind anymore, just because that felt like just kind of annoying to have to do that. And it felt like it would be smoother just to bash, 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 bash. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boosh! Big HotA, big overpower. Everything explodes. You're doing 40% more damage after that, and then just go right back to bashing without having to do the Whirlwind in between. And it let me kind of like move my stats around a little bit. And we've arrived at something that I think is pretty good, but definitely still has a lot of room for improvement. So I didn't really do solo pit pushing yesterday, but we've cleared like 85 comfortably with the prior build. And I think this one's stronger, so I think we're gonna be clearing 85 plus. Definitely just like one-shotting all the tier 4 bosses and that kind of thing. So definitely pretty solid. And even though I do have some mythics at this point and some uniques that are really good, I think that even without them, you'd still be doing just fine and can progress with this build a-okay once you get some of the basics down. And there are different ways of creating.
Quiet here.
Thanks, Subo. Glad to hear it. I think that there are lots of like ways of sort of solving the same problems. Like if you can figure out a way to generate your earthquakes and with some sort of rune setup, and then you have the chest piece to detonate them, you're pretty much gonna be able to get started with the build just fine. So, but that being said, you probably won't be able to start doing the HotA-Quake until you have Mantle of Mountain's Fury. But finding one of these off of the Beast in the Ice as soon as you have access to that boss really shouldn't be too bad. So let's just go ahead and start off with the skills that we're using. So we are using Wrath of the Berserker as our ult. It's gonna deal some extra damage for us. It's gonna scoop monsters together. It's gonna give us berserking, and that's just kind of like one of our big ways of getting rage generation. It's gonna give us some damage reduction because of our talents, of which we'll go through in a moment, and just a nice ult to use. We're using Rallying Cry for another source of Unstoppable. This also grants Unstoppable. Rallying Cry is gonna give us Unstoppable. It's gonna give us a bonus to our resource generation, and it's going to give us movement speed, and we're also having it set up to fortify us. So that's one source of fortify. We're using Challenging Shout. So I don't know if I really need Challenging Shout, but we are using a bunch of shouts. We're going to use all 3 shouts. One of them is just going to proc from our rune setup. That'd be Warcry. So Challenging Shout is nice for the extra damage reduction that you get, for sure. It also is nice because it gives you max health, which is good for more overpower damage. And it also applies a taunt, which is a type of CC that we're going to be making use of to deal more damage to enemies, basically. So we're using Ground Stomp, which is an AoE stun, generating Fury, primarily reducing the cooldown on our Wrath of the Berserker for more Unstoppable uptime, just more damage uptime, more Berserking uptime. Then we're using Bash, which we're using to create the guaranteed overpower effect by critting with it with a 2-handed weapon. We got to get 4 of those, then you get the guaranteed detonation of the overpower. And then we're also getting a little bit of extra fortify from that. And then, of course, good old HotA, granting us basically 40% more damage for 5 seconds after overpowering with Hammer of the Ancients, which we can guarantee with Bash. So we can take a look at that talents to actually get an idea of how that works. So we are talenting into Bash, going through Clobbering into Combat Bash, going into HotA for the normal HotA little enhancement, and then going for Violent Hammer of the Ancients. And I'm going to try to get a Mobalytics build for this. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but that's what we're working with right here. We've got Warpath, so after overpowering, you deal 12% increased damage for 4 seconds. So we're going to be overpowering frequently. That's great to have. We also have Belligerence, where damaging an enemy with a basic skill increases your damage by 12% for 4 seconds. So that's going to be, both of these are going to be proccing very frequently because our rotation is just bash, 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 HotA. So you're getting both the buffs like all the time, which is pretty cool. For ground stomp, we're going through into strategic ground stomp. We're grabbing the extra life, grabbing extra damage reduction against elites. We're going into rallying cry through strategic rallying cry for the fortify. We're taking, this is interesting, we're taking a little bit of thorns, just the teeniest, tiniest bit, just so that we can get a source of bleed, so that we can still benefit from damage against bleeding targets and damage reduction from bleeding targets. That's a big deal. What is my Barbarian's head, dude? He's freaking out. Dude, chill. Take it easy. What are you looking at? There you go. It's freaking me out too. So challenging shout, we're only putting 2 points in. We don't need more fury, we don't need the thorns. So we're just taking this just so we can get the extra life or, you know, more life and overpower. Now into here, I'm actually talenting into Warcry and talenting into it big time so that we can get more damage bonus on Warcry, and we're also grabbing the Fortify. I'll show you in a second when we go over the gear how that's proccing. But we're going Booming Voice for longer skill, you know, effect duration on shouts. We could take Guttural Yell, like if we needed to take less damage instead of do more damage, but doing more damage is usually pretty good. So I'm putting the extra points into there instead of here, but we could do that too. We have Aggressive Resistance, not even talented at all. We're just getting this from our helmet, and we're getting Prolific Fury from that as well. This could even be higher ranks if my helmet was better rolled, so eventually we'll get one, then it'll just be slightly higher, but that's cool. Into here, we're doing Pit Fighter. We deal 9% increased damage to close enemies and gain 6% damage reduction. One thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to move this talent into here, because I want 1 point here, because that'll cap my crit. Now we have 100% crit. I had 97 point something percent. Now we have 100%, so that's cool. So take a little bit of crit here if you need it. That's cool. Dealing 9% increased damage to close enemies and take 6% less damage, which is cool. We have Slaying Strike. You deal extra damage to injured and healthy enemies. And injured is like 35% or below, and then healthy is 80% or above. This one, we're just using 1 point of thick skin to get access to counter-offensive. So when we have Fortify, we're dealing more damage. And this one's kind of neat. While fortified, you gain an additional damage reduction and heal for some of your life. I have a couple points to work with in here. It looks like 2. We could put those somewhere else. I may even put them like 1 point there and then just leave a point here, or we could move this somewhere else if we needed it. That's fine. We're always fortified, so healing a little bit more is great. I want to put more points in there. Coming down here, we have our points in Heavy Hitter. We're getting some from our weapons, like the skill upgrades, which we want more of that. That would be cool to have more Heavy Hitter points, but we'll talk about that in a second. We have Heavy Handed. We're doing increased crit damage with that. We have Brute Force. We're dealing increased overpower damage with this, which is, again, it's okay. We're only really overpowering with HotA most of the time, but if an Earthquake does overpower, it's cool to hit harder with it. But this could go somewhere else, perhaps. We are using Wall Up, so our skills using bludgeoning weapons have increased damage to enemies vulnerable, which is great. We have Wrath of the Berserker, which is our ult. We're putting 5 points in it, so it does like an AoE and it pulls. Although, again, it's not really pulling because of something that I'm doing with my bossing setup, or boss talents, but I'll show you that in a second. And then at the end of it all, we're going Unconstrained. So we're getting more damage while berserking and less damage taken while berserk, which is all the time, and while below, you know, a certain amount of health, we are also berserk all the time, which is cool. So for Paragon, so I got to give a shout out to my guy Gozu, who was in the stream yesterday, who loves this build, has been playing this build a ton, and was helping us sort of answer some questions about certain decisions that you can make with the build pathing and whatnot. So this is a Paragon setup that we changed into after some recommendations from him. So we're going to go, and we're actually going to use some glyphs that are not max leveled for me, because we're going to work on that today. That'll be fun. We're going to use some weird stuff, but it ends up working out in a very interesting way. So we're going to start off here, and then again, this will be mobilytic, so we don't necessarily have to go through every last little thing, but I will show you what we're doing. So in the first tree, we're using Revenge Glyph, which is buffing rare nodes. So we're going to get a lot of damage to elites, some strength, some damage off of that, which is nice. And this is also cool because a lot of these glyphs just require strength. If I wanted to, we could swap into something else while we're working on a Revenge, but one of the big things about Revenge is that dealing Thorns damage to an enemy increases all damage it takes from you by 15%, up to 15%. So that's a ton of damage increase, right? So that Revenge is interesting for that, but it's also buffing our damage to elites, which is also super, super nice. So the next one, we're going into the Blood Rage tree, and we're dropping Rumble into the Blood Rage tree, because I don't think that there's any Paragon board that can give you quite as much strength as Blood Rage. So we're getting a 115 strength, buffing our Earthquakes. So that's a ton of extra Earthquake damage, and you deal more damage to bosses and crowd-controlled enemies for each active Earthquake. So that's going to sort of play into our decision to temper our weapons a certain way in a bit. But yeah, we're using Rumble with Blood Rage. Then we can go up here real quick and talk about this one. We are using Martial again, along with Force of Nature. So the thing about this is we're going to need more close damage, right? We're only getting 150% of this bonus. So when I temper my weapons, we're going to need to get more close damage to make this work. But this helps that we have some close damage here, but we don't have enough. And I think it's partially because of the fact that we have not tempered our weapons for enough close damage. What we do have enough of is damage to Berserking, but this one you'll notice we tempered for crit damage, which is not what we need. So we're going to have to make some maces and get some close damage on there, because that's going to make a really big difference. Another thing we could do for the meanwhile is, instead of like Revenge, what we could do is we could plop something like Territorial in here. We would need more Dexterity, but if we decided to do that, we would sort of gain access to enough close damage to fix that situation. So I might even just do that right now. We should have enough Dex really easily to have at least enough to get 83%, which I don't think is enough to fix this, but it's very close. So that's one thing I could do right now in the meanwhile, until we have Revenge leveled and until we get enough close damage from our weapons. But I do like Territorial, and that is, looking at it right now, it's an easy way to fix that. So I might do that for right now. But Revenge is another really, really cool option. It's going to make me do a lot less damage to elites, though, so I don't know. We'll see. Regardless, we're using Martial here for right now, just because that is going to give us the cooldown reduction on our shouts. It is going to buff the damage to close enemies because we have this stuff here. So as we level Martial, it'll get even more. That's another thing we can do to get damage to close, right? Is we just level Glyphs, and that'll buff these 3 by a lot more, which is cool, and buff this one a little bit more, right? No, it'll just buff the rares. But anyway, that's another way to sort of solve this thing that we can keep an eye on, is this Force of Nature, to buff all that damage, the Earthquake damage, by a lot more, which is cool. Now we're going to go over here to the Decimator tree and the Decimator glyph. We're going to chuck Ire in there for a whole lot more damage while Berserking, which is important for our Blood Rage buff that we're trying to get, right? We're trying to max out the Blood Rage thing, so our damage is increased up to 45%. Got the full 45%, so as long as we keep our tempers the same on my weapons, we're going to have that maxed out as well, which is really cool. So we're trying to take advantage of all these little buffs, all these little scaling buffs that we get in our tree. So that's why we're going to, you know, play around with our glyphs a certain way, make sure we have enough strength, make sure we have enough close damage, and make sure we have, enough Berserk, or damage on Berserk, to fix all these and get the maximum gains that you can out of it. So Decimator is cool. Every time you make an enemy vulnerable, they're going to take more damage, but overpowering a vulnerable enemy is going to give you an additional 20% damage. So we're overpowering frequently because of HotA, so we're going to get a lot of value out of Decimator. And then Ire, of course, is helpful for the damage while Berserking, but also making sure that we hit enough to get the power up from Blood Rage. Then we come over here. I'm switching out of Warbringer. I love Warbringer for the Fortified generation, but we need more damage, and we're sort of addressing tankiness differently with like our shout selection and whatnot. And I'm still wearing Doombringer, but we'll talk about that with our gear. But for this one, we are just using good old Challenger, which is interesting. It buffs the normal nodes, so we're getting a little bit of just stats out of this, but we're also getting a tremendous amount of increased damage to elites, like 20% more damage to elites is pretty cool. And we're just getting enough stats to make sure that we hit that 4,000 strength rank point to get the maximum benefit from one of our legendary powers that we're using. So a very interesting way of solving all these sort of issues of getting the most juice out of the double scaling that you can get. But also we come all the way down for Weapon Master, which gives us the weapon swap thing is not that big of a deal, but dealing 30% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies is a pretty big deal. So that's pretty cool. And in terms of all the little selection, you guys can go through your talent tree and take a look at what you're getting. You're getting a variety of attack speed, getting a variety of damage, some stats, different sort of damage buffs, different sort of damage reductions in the form of like reduction from vulnerable, reduction from bleeding, things like that. And then we're also grabbing a little bit more health now with the trees, because we're going to need that, right? But that's the basics of where you got to go. And again, we'll try to put in Mobalytics, but we can start off with either Territorial, or eventually I'd like to do Revenge, as we buff up our close damage through the martial setup, right? Start there. Then we'll go with Blood Rage and Rumble. We'll go with Force of Nature with Martial. Could even do Undaunted there if we wanted to, but that's fine. We've got Decimator with Ire. And we've got Challenger with Force of Nature. So that's pretty cool. So for our gear, we are using rune words, various rune words to create earthquakes. Very early on, you can use the mobility one. I don't think I have that in my inventory right now. I think it's called like Mani. Is that right? Mani is when you use 2 mobility skills, you proc an earthquake. Now, I like Neo for when I'm going to be doing a combination of standing still or moving. Neo will just proc earthquakes every 6 seconds. Or sorry, every 2 seconds it'll proc an earthquake. You can use Bach, where whenever you move 5 meters, you'll proc an earthquake. So if you're moving a ton, you can use that one. What I'm doing right now, though, is some interesting tech where it's Lith, which is the legendary rune. So some of these runes are going to be harder to come by. Mani is not hard to come by, and neither is Neo. So starting off with Neo or Mani to get your earthquakes is fine. Eventually, you can do Bach or Lith. Lith is really cool for pits, where when you stand still while fighting for 0.6 seconds, you are going to be proc an earthquake every 1.2 seconds. Is that right? Oh no, it looks like you will proc an earthquake every 0.6 seconds. So that's a lot of earthquakes, right? I'm trying to just like do the math here. I think it just tells you though, right? It's like it will proc one every point. I think Lith is you get 25 every 0.3 seconds. So yeah, this is going to proc one every 0.6. That makes sense. So when you're standing still, you're procking earthquakes all over the place. So you can just kind of like stand still, bash, 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 HotA, right? And it's going to be earthquakes all over the place, getting exploded. It's awesome for pits. But when you're running around a little bit more, you might want to do Bach or Mani or even Neo. But then for the other rune setup, we are using Igni. So Igni is pretty cool. It just stores up offering, and then when you cast a skill, it'll like spend it. So we're using this to get our war cry going. Again, if you're using Mani, you can chuck, like if you're using Mani for this, you can chuck in a Neo for this for like a super cheap option. Ohm is also a legendary rune, so you may not have an Ohm to invoke war cry. You could do something else like the Spiritborn's Pull, I think is really cool. The Druid's Barrier is really cool. You could even use it to do Challenging Shout. You have some cool options on what to do. You could do the Wolves to summon Wolves to get you vulnerability on enemies, which is cool. But you have a lot of different options. But eventually, what I'm doing right now is we are using this to do Warcry. And that's working out pretty good. But now with our runes basically set up, we can go through the gear and show you what we're cooking with in particular. So we have the Ugly Bastard Helmet to give us Wrath of the Berserker CD. Prolific Fury and Aggressive Resistance are both min-rolled on that, though, so we could get a better helmet for sure. What is not min-rolled, however, is the increased fire damage. It's 100% increased fire damage. All of our damage is fire while berserking, which is pretty cool. So we're just doing 100% increased damage with this one, or 100, maybe 100 times damage. It's like the way that Diablo does damage is crazy. But anyway, that's nice. We're getting big cooldown off Wrath of the Berserker. It's making our effects when enraged more powerful, but like, you know, buffing our damage by a lot. And we have rubies in this one for the extra strength. So Mantle of the Mountains is one of those like sort of build enabling uniques that you need. This is the one that makes the hammers explode your earthquakes. Ideally, this is getting maxed out with chance for earthquakes to deal double damage. We've got like 2 out of 3 in it. That's good enough for right now. It's going to buff your hammer to the Ancients, but doesn't do much. Defensive stance is fine to make you take less damage. That's cool. So you can just stand there and swang when you have Fortify up. And then the big thing is it's going to make your Hammer of the Ancients hit in a line, and if that line passes through earthquakes, they blow up and deal their full damage. So even if like the earthquake has been down for a while, it's almost over, it's already dealt a bunch of damage, you hit it with an earthquake, or you hit it with a Hammer of the Ancients line, it'll blow up for the full damage that it would have done. So that's pretty crazy how that works. And you need this for the HotA build, so there's that. You don't need Fists of Fate, but they are awesome, and these ones in particular are insane. They have a tremendously high lucky hit chance buff, and on lucky hit, it has a 100% chance to make enemies vulnerable. So if you can get these gloves, they're awesome. They have high crit chance, a little bit of attack speed, and your attacks randomly deal 1% to 290% of their normal damage. So sometimes you don't hit very hard, and sometimes you hit really freaking hard. And they're an interesting pair of gloves, but we're basically using this to make any enemy that I hit get vulnerable. So I want to say vulnified, but it's a video, so we should maybe say it makes them vulnerable, but it makes them vulnified. Tybalt's Will, I changed my pants from the tacits into these, so a little bit less resist, but my resists are still getting solved other ways, which allows us to get big damage reduction while unstoppable, which is cool, but also deal more damage while unstoppable and a little bit after being unstoppable. And we generate a bunch of primary resource by going unstoppable, and we're doing that through Rallying Cry and Wrath of the Berserker. So that's pretty cool. Just subtracting a little bit of defense and into offense and just kind of like retooling things a little bit. But in a different way, we're also retooling our offense into more defense in the form of Yen's Blessing. We're using all these shouts now, and what Yen's will do is they'll trigger a non-mobility, non-ultimate skill that is currently on cooldown whenever you cast a skill. So every 8 seconds, it's usually going to sort of do some other shout that's on cooldown, which will help reduce all my other cooldowns and give me the buffs, of course. It's giving me a ton of resist, a ton of stats. I was using HotA-Quake, which are also fine for this build. But yeah, I just got a 3-star Yen's, and I was like, let's put those on if we're going to be doing all these shouts. I think what I really ultimately want to do is get a pair of boots that has strength, resist all, and then a G-Aid or like, you know, greater affixed war cry for more damage. I don't actually need movement speed. We're usually just kind of like moving between packs, planting our feet, and then doing huge, you know, HotA explosion sessions on a big pack of mobs in the pits. And that's kind of what I'm gearing towards, is like doing heavy pits, because everything else just dies from earthquakes just running around. So like you don't need to like optimize. You can, I guess, optimize, have some movement speed to just run around and explode everything. But I'm mostly like, okay, what's actually challenging? It's pits. So I'm trying to gear up for pits, and then Warcry boots would be good for pits. And then you could put a combination of damage while berserking probably, and like earthquake size on your boots, I think, because it's like, isn't it like offensive and utility on boots? So that could be pretty cool to get more earthquake size. That would be excellent to do more AoE. But the weapons, okay, so the weapons, we talked a little bit about the glyph setup. Right now, I would probably temper the weapon for close damage, just to fix my close damage if we wanted to use a different rune setup. If we wanted to use Revenge instead of Territorial, that would be good to have. But ultimately, what I want on a weapon is greater affixed strength, and then probably life, and then crit damage. And if you could greater affix all 3 of those, awesome. That'd be insane. But I think I want strength mostly. But then what I have on here is, I don't think what is super optimal, but we're sort of like making it work. So in my understanding, from the guys who know, and Gozu in particular was helping us with this, because I had a lot of questions about this. You could, if you want to go super simple, you could just go heavy hitter on everything for temper. But I think heavy hitter on 1 2-hander, chance to spawn extra earthquakes on the other 2-hander, and then heavy hitter on your 1-handers is kind of something that can make sense. But I guess you can have some sort of like mix and match. So no, sorry, it's heavy hitter on weapon. I misspoke. Heavy hitter on weapon. I just have it opposite, so I've got myself kind of confused. Heavy hitter on 1 2-hander, chance to spawn on the other 2-hander, and then duration on your 1-handers. But I'm using a Doombringer, so things are kind of weird, right? So I have Earthquake duration on 2-hander, and then this critical strike damage should be close damage for what I'm doing right now, but ultimately I think it's okay to do crit strike damage. Then I have Ground Stomp, creates earthquakes, right, that deal damage while in the earthquake and then a little bit after, which is giving you 2 sources of buffs, right? One of them is buffing your earthquakes, the other one is buffing all your damage, which is also earthquake damage, right? And then we have the Lith Tech. But then, if you don't have a Doombringer, what you can do is run a second 1-hander that has strength, life, crit damage, damage while berserking, and then duration to the earthquake. One of them needs to have this Executioner's legendary power on there, which makes your earthquakes deal more damage depending on your strength, and we want to have like 4,000 strength to get that full 200% buff. And then the other one could be like a Vehement Brawler with strength, life, crit damage while berserking would be okay too, or close damage, whatever you need in order to satisfy your Paragon requirement to get the maximum buff. And then after that you can just go crit damage if you have enough. But since I do have a Doombringer that's 3-star Doombringer, like I want to use this thing. It also was kind enough to do the full maximum life buff, which helps us have like 20k life unbuffed, which is nuts. It also makes us very tanky in the form of the damage reduction, and the lucky hit is always proccing, right, which is making enemies around me do 20% less damage as well. So this is an incredibly good item for increasing our defenses, and I don't really want to drop it if I don't have to, but if I was going to, I'd make another weapon just like this, just instead of heavy hitter, it would have earthquake duration, and I would put vehement brawler on there for the extra damage while ultimate. Or I could put probably what I would actually do is just put conceited on there, so I'd get the damage all the time. Instead of the ranks to ultimate are kind of cool because it does bring the cooldown down a little bit more. And right now, since we're using Yen's Blessing instead of Rakanauts, the cooldown's starting to get high up there a little bit. But with the combination of Martial and all of our shouts and Ground Stomp, the cooldown shouldn't be too bad. But anyway, that's kind of a big deal, right? So the two-handed weapon we have, this one is like pretty much okay. It's just rolled pretty low. But strength, life, crit damage, damage to close, chance for earthquakes to cast twice with incendiary is great. Max rolled incendiary is cool. This is another source of buffing our earthquake damage and converting the damage into fire. But again, everything else is converted to fire anyway, so it doesn't really matter when we're berserk. So, but it does give us 120% more damage on earthquakes, which is cool. So this weapon is about right. It's just rolled kind of low, right? The crit is rolled kind of low. The chance to spawn earthquakes, double earthquakes, is kind of low, but whatever. And then of course we have our war cry in this activated with Igni, which you could do other things too. Like if I was running Lith in this, I could run Neo in this, and that would be fine too. But anyway, as far as amulets go, this amulet's pretty bad. We want, ultimately, I think what we want is strength, GA, and then you want like 2 different sources of like plus skills on there, like heavy-handed is cool. I don't know if you can get heavy hitter on a necklace, but something that increases your damage, like Wallop is something that could be cool too. Just something that increases your damage with plus skills on necklace is pretty sweet. But you do want the greater affix of strength, which we don't have. But again, this is definitely something that could be improved by a ton. We do have damage while berserking on there, also min rolled, and we have earthquake size on there, which is something that we could do along with boots, or I think pants perhaps, but we're not going to do that right now. But anyway, just kind of let you guys know like what's possible and where you can go with the build. But you do want greater affix strength, and then whatever else, right? Right now I have crit on there, which is okay. But the main thing is you want strength, and then put damage while berserking on there with earthquake size. It's cool. Now I have a really weird one on here, really weird legendary power, which does do a lot of damage, but I could very easily just put conceited on here, because what this does is it kind of screws up your CC a little bit, this combo, so you're not really able to grip enemies in quite as much. But if you don't really mind, you're going to deal 66% more damage to enemies, which is kind of a lot. But you could just put conceited on there, which I might do anyway. I just might put conceited on here so I can still pull enemies in better, but I wanted to let you guys know about this option. And the reason why this works is, let me finish the rings and I'll talk to you guys about it. So we made a Ring of Starless Skies yesterday, which is pretty cool. I'm not 100% sure about it, but it did also GA 3 times into crit, so, or GA'd and then masterworked into crit. So it's a lot of crit chance. It gives us a lot of attack speed, lucky hit chance, which you don't really need because we have so much of it already, but a lot of crit to help us sort of move our crit around. A big thing that it does is spending your primary resource, reduces the resource cost of your skills, and increases your damage by up to 50%, so that's kind of nice. If I just used a normal ring, it would look something not like this. It would be strength, it'd be crit chance, and it'd be life. And then we would put Wrath of the Berserker cooldown reduction on there with, I think we have critical strike damage on here right now, which I think is fine. But you could also do like close damage or damage while berserking if you needed those still, right? And that might even be better. But my gear is a little bit weird. But we do want to have Bold Chieftains on here for the shout skill reduction. If I wasn't using this ring, I would probably be using either Vehement Brawler or Conceited if I was going to do this setup, just for more damage, right? In terms of your legendary power. But we're making this work for now. This is all good, but you definitely want Wrath of Berserker cooldown, strength, life, and then crit chance in order to keep your crit chance up. Because, and then of course you're socketing with diamonds, socketing with rubies, socketing with emeralds, and then socketing with your runes right there. So that puts us at 4K strength, looking good, looking good. The reason why we are doing crit on rings and stuff is because we are no longer having to use this crit thing. If you don't have 100% crit, use this. Once you get 100% crit, you can drop this and put other stuff in. So this is why we're using that the unstoppable damage one, right? When you damage a crowd-controlled enemy, it makes them and surrounding enemies unstoppable, but you gain 20% increased damage, attack speed, and movement speed for 3 seconds. So Rallying Cry, you hit an enemy, boom, they're unstoppable. Stun an enemy, boom, they're unstoppable. Right? Slow an enemy, boom, then hit them, boom, they're unstoppable. And when they're unstoppable, you deal 86% more damage to them, have 20% attack speed and movement speed. So that's kind of insane. The big downside is you don't get to grip them in anymore if they're unstoppable. So you kind of have to run around and hit them. But if you have enough AoE on your earthquakes and you're spawning enough earthquakes, you're good to go, right? I'm still using this one. So dropping the crit and having crit on my gear allows me to use this, which is just 25% more damage. Now I'm still using this for, I don't need this for when I'm just killing like dinky monsters, but when we're doing big pits, it's nice to have blisters down. One, because those blisters, even against the boss, count as targets to reduce your cooldown on your shouts by shouting at more targets. When you ground stomp, it's going to reduce your ultimate cooldown more. And when we're doing big pits, it's kind of nice to have that extra thing to hit and to chunk a boss or a big elite's health by destroying the blisters. And then we have good old Blackmailer Sabotage. Whenever you gain Fortify, you gain additional 30% of the amount as barrier. And we have a ton of health. We have a ton of Fortify. It's going to be a big barrier to keep us alive. And that is pretty much the basics of the setup, I think. I think we got the basics. I can show you the gameplay a little bit with our very exact current setup. In terms of potions, probably just chuck a strength potion on. Or in terms of potions, if you don't have enough crit, you can throw a crit on. I have, like, my stats are all good. I think Overpower and Vuln is probably the best. Then we'll do a life one. If we're trying to get, like, actually giga buffed, we'll do a life one. We'll do a strength one. Wherever that's at. That's the strength. What do we put on there? Life, strength, and then all res, and max res, and that's kind of what we're cooking with right now. So let's see. Just so it doesn't go too long, we can run like a, what, 70? We've been running 75, we can do 80 maybe? That might be kind of like the mobs might have a little bit of HP. Again, the things about this build that I want to work on is I want to get my revenge glyph online. All right, I want to do more damage to enemies that are hitting me with thorns, right? Just kind of run around, collect some enemies, see what we can find. And then we just start standing still and just hammering. Now, this is on a lower pit. If it's a higher pit or it's a stronger enemy, you can 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, and then hit him with a big ol' HotA slammer. Some things to keep in mind. We're gonna try to explain stuff, so who knows about the gameplay here, boys. First pit of the day. Kind of run around and stack up some enemies. I think this should be a pit level where we can just kind of destroy everything, though. But we'll keep our Wrath of Berserker rolling. We'll keep our buffs up. Just hit shouts when they're up. Bash, 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 and then just HotA slam when you get some earthquakes procking. Now, if you want to do this, like, what we were cooking with before is we were kind of figuring out if we wanted to just do heavy hitter for harder hitting earthquakes. But I'm a big fan of the earthquake duration for the reason we described earlier, where when the earthquakes get stacked up more, you can benefit from a ton of damage that they're dealing while you're sitting here bashing things, and then still hit them for like their full damage. But it also lets you stack a bunch of earthquakes up, so bosses and CC'd enemies will take more damage. Again, we don't really do CC because you'll see, basically as soon as I hit enemies, they become unstoppable. But that makes us do so much more damage to them. Brother? There we go. And my B-net just pop up trying to update something or something. I don't know what that was. But it's kind of awkward because you no longer have your Wrath of the Berserker activation gripping enemies in. So I don't know if I love that. And if you don't love that, then what you do is you just take Unstoppable off, put Conceited on your neck, and then you probably run like the Overpower does fire AoE talent, and I think for your boss talents, that'll be just fine. But if you don't really mind, you know, taunting the enemies to you and they just kind of run into your HotA like puddles, then that would be fine too, right? But I think the extra damage is kind of nice, and it's definitely nice on bosses, and the boss damage is, I think, one of the things that we're going to struggle against the most, because bosses can get a little high HP when you get into the higher pits. Ideally, the pit gameplay is like running around looking for packs of rares, kind of getting your shouts going, planting your feet, doing some bashes, and then letting it rip with big HotAs. And then all those earthquakes, all the damage just starts to explode everywhere. And my earthquakes, I could definitely use some more earthquake size so that the AoE is just more fierce. But we have a lot of room to upgrade this build, and that's kind of exciting. Not only just with better rolls, but also like finding like the right legendary pieces, because we have uniques. We even have our mythic now, but we need to just get crazier rolls. That's kind of where we're at with the Diablo endgame. Is our character is like mostly put together, mostly. Now we just have to find the like finishing touches, right? So when monsters run away like this thing, it would be kind of nice to have the Wrath of Berserker that pulls enemies in, but we don't have it because we're using it to do more damage. But when we fight a boss, it'll be fine. So this is a pit 80. This is like a pretty chill farmer. I feel like we're not super focused, and the layout has been a little bit weird. Mob types have been a little bit weird, but we can definitely clear these pretty quick. And that's good for farming up our glyphs that we're using now that we weren't using before. So we can figure out how to get just squeeze a little bit more damage out, because once you get to that point, it's like, yeah, I mean, 20% damage here and there from a different roll or from moving, you know, things around so that you're getting your crit or resist from different sources or whatever, right? Where you can still scale that damage. I mean, 20% more damage when you're hitting for 200, 400, 600 billion can be kind of a lot. It's kind of a big deal. So that's the phase that we're at right now. But the gameplay, hopefully, I mean, it's like, it's pretty fun. This is kind of what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be able to plant my feet and just slam and not have to worry about like doing these little whirlwinds in between. Another cool thing about ground stomp is it does plop an earthquake down. So it's another source of earthquake for detonation and just for the buff that you get from having stuff down. So the berserk uptime is a little bit worse with this setup, but we're gonna keep working on that. And it's ends up feeling pretty good just to run around and blast, just crush everything in your wake. But we're gonna work on upgrading Challenger and Marshal now. Hopefully we can get some good upgrades on these little guys. And that will be one of those ways we continue to scale our power. Again, this is gonna buff our strength, damage to elites, and our close damage is basically what we're looking for out of those. And then revenge will also need to be buffed up too, but we'll keep working on that over time. And I think the main one we need to do is Marshal to get the close damage so we can take out the territorial. But overall, the build's been a lot of fun. I know that we've been yapping for quite a while about the basics of this thing, but if you want to give it a try, there are only a few things that you need. It's mostly like you really need to get the legendaries online for the different types of earthquake damage buffs. You need to get the runes online for some way of proccing tech. That's really all that you need there, and then you need the chess piece. Once you get all of those things going, then everything else is like, okay, yeah, Ugly Bastard Helmet's sick, Tybalt's Will is sick, Fist of Fate is sick, you know, like, and then just get things rolling from there, scale the damage, level up your glyphs, should be a lot of fun. We're gonna, oh, interesting, bash levels, that's funny. We're gonna keep playing this build. We're gonna be streaming later today. We'll have the build on Mobalytics for you as well, hopefully around the same time that the video goes out. And then we're gonna keep searching for weapon options to clean up our tempers a little bit better. We're gonna keep looking for boots that give us war cry so we can increase our damage and increase the AoE of our earthquakes. Just keep looking for better rolls on our weapons and fix those up, and should be able to keep scaling this character up and hopefully maybe pushing Pit 100 solo. We will see. We will see. But either way, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely continue to show them love. I'm having a blast playing Diablo. The stream's going great. Content's going great. We'll keep hammering, and then you know, keep the gains rolling. Either way, thanks for watching. Be sure to show the video some love. We'll see you guys live on stream. Peace.